What's happening? I need a new computer for this gag to work. Look, I'll show you where I am. Hang on. Exposure's a bit shit. Shows I'm in Western Australia. Stupid gag. Anyway. Do you like? I need to buy a new computer. I can't deal. This is why I'm held back. I'm held back by these things. If you're loaded and want to buy me a new MacBook Pro, fucking go for it. Anyway, I'm Andrew Tate. Okay, well, that's over. I've got to learn how to not overtag the jokes, Taya. And anyway, this one's real. Thought I'd be balling for today. And cigar's real too. Fucking. I like how I can still see the snap on my still see me with this, just sitting there talking like this. All right, hang on a sec. Let me just. Oh, that's funny. So, good morning. I'm held back by my lack of resources and my shitty computer. Like, I swear to God, if I had all the time in the world and the tech to book shit off, it'd be the best stream in the world. Anyway, hang on just one sec. I'm going to have to quit this fucking Snap app, which unfortunately I'm going to have to quit it because it's just chugging my computer too much. This is bullshit, having to work like this, by the way. Happy New Year. I didn't realise when I scheduled the stream that it was actually New Year's Eve. So I'm going to say quick one, but it's never a quick one. And I'm going to take this off because it's distracting. And yeah, so anyway. Hi, Diane. Diane's here. Good. Okay. So let me just turn that shit off. All right, so we're in business. Let me just turn the chat. Did the chat come up? No. Anyway, I apologise for my hair. I have spent, because I couldn't get into the hairdresser before Christmas. I've made the decision because I was starting to dye my hair every 2 weeks. And I think like most, you get to a certain age, like you're 40, where you just go, this is unsustainable, this is unmanageable. I'm also naturally blonde to begin with, and I've dyed it brunette for as long as I can remember. So, and the COVID hair situation got away from me where, you start dyeing your own hair, you start doing your own roots, and then it starts to get the shit happening. So then you just know that at some point you're going to need to go in for a colour correction. This is my life. I've been trying to do this for years. I always reach about this stage and then go, fuck it. I'm determined to make it this time. But maybe I could just go bald. I am going to cut it quite shortly. But anyway, I decided that what I would do is I couldn't get into the hairdresser. So what I thought I'd do is I'd do the lifting part myself, which is always the dangerous part. But I've been doing that. And I went at it with texturizer as well, just because I couldn't get in for a hair appointment before Christmas and get it done. So I thought, okay, do what you can do and then have the hairdresser fix it in a couple of weeks. So I'll do that. Let it grease up. So I'm letting it, that's why it's greasy, is because I'm letting it all grease up and, the natural oils to kick in, because bleach does a number on your hair. So anyway, that's why. Live with my greasy hair. It's just how it is. Hoping to get it done soon. So, but yeah, I've got to go. I've just got to commit to going grey now and going to get the foils and all of that stuff. And yeah, I've been naturally blonde for years, and I didn't want to be blonde because my sister's blonde and we looked alike. And, so I was like, no, my point of differentiation is the broody brunette, not the blonde bimbo. So stupid. These 80s movies have done a real number on our fucking heads, haven't they? Like, you still just, but this is actually, it does lead back to what we're talking about, somewhat about censorship, and how I think we do need to acknowledge that these things do have an influence on our worldview, right? A lot of this stuff, like, I think when you study psychology, you start to see just how out of control a lot of the stuff, again, I'm not obviously Freud and subconscious, that's a little bit woo, but, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of processing that happens behind the scenes that, we take a lot in, right? We do take a lot in that we don't realize that we're taking in. And even as a kid, when you explore, kind of the schemas, they're called schemas, right? And the patterns that you, that you live out every day and where they come from and the source of those, a lot of them are just, muscle memory and sort of, instinctive. Anyway, but that's the role that media plays, right? So something like this idea that blondes are dumb I always identified with the brunette growing up, the brunette with the glasses and the ponytail. It is so trite. And I like to think that I'm above these things, but we're not. No one is, right? But you just say these things as though they're automatic. I think going through, if we're talking about New Year, a good New Year's resolution. Sorry, I've had a thing where the complete upper register of my voice has disappeared, so I have to keep the hot drinks going. Coffee's not ideal for it, but, But anyway, so, oh my God, I was given some medicinal brownie last night to see if it helps my nerve pain and some of the, all of that sort of stuff. And it actually did, but I was told to take half because I'm looking at getting the medical, thing. But I because I'm not a habitual smoker of these things or whatever, I have no idea like what the benefits are. So a friend of mine gave me one of their brownies. This is someone who's been taking it for quite a while, I think, because told me to take half. I took half of a half and I was fucked. Good night's sleep though. But yeah, it has sort of helped my voice a little bit, and believe it or not, because it's supposed to constrict mucus, so I'm not sure. It relaxes the nerves. I've got to look it up, but it seems to have this effect of relaxing the nerves and getting the blood flow better, but constricting my mucus glands, which is why you get dry. Anyway, boring medical shit, Tate. I like nerdy shit. I think when you've got chronic health issues, you start to be point of survival pro tip, be as micro involved in your healthcare as you can be. Don't be afraid. There's one place where you could never afford to be afraid of being called Karen, and that's in a hospital setting or a doctor's setting. Okay, don't be afraid to, obviously you don't go all Dunning-Kruger on us and go, speaking of Andrew Tate, but don't go all Dunning-Kruger on everybody and override the doctor or think that, Dr. Google helps. But absolutely never be afraid to, defend yourself in a hospital setting. I've been nearly killed several times because of, medical negligence. So anyway, but that's going to come back. We're coming back to sort of the law and what the law is. I came on bald with a Snapchat filter. I tricked you. It's actually about the law. It's actually about what the law is for and what the legal process is for, and why I think that the answer is not censorship on big tech, but on the legal process. Okay. Now, I used a little bit of, wasn't clickbait because I showed up as Andrew Tate. I delivered what I promised. But at the same time, all right, that's very distracting, isn't it? Okay. I've been meaning to do this joke for forever. I do it to my husband all the time when I'm being like cute and stuff, and I sit there and I go like this. I go, okay, all right. So we're warmed up now. Just give me 1 sec. Let me just. I don't think that. Hang on 1 sec. Let me just refresh this chat cache too. Hang on. Oh, it's here. Oh, that's why, because I changed it to 720p. Hang on, 1 sec. 1 sec. I'll address that in 1 second. Just let me adjust these things. Sorry, I went down to 720p because my computer's so shithouse. So I had no choice. I have to just keep degrading it until I can afford to upgrade. So 1 second. Everything's a little expensive right now. I'm not sure if people are aware. Everything's it's just crazy. Anyway, So True Dreamer TV. I'm warming up. So what do you think about Kanye West? Oh God, here we go. Missing, including the family of rapper Theophilus London filed a missing persons report with Los Angeles police this week. Okay, is this like a bot? Like, what does that say about? I don't know. I don't know the story. Whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I'm saying that Andrew Tate. Okay, so I think let's just give that account. Okay, so this is the new account. I'm warming up for a minute and then I'll get to my main point. But this is not your. It's not your average. It's not your average chat where this is all back and forth. Right? It's more of a comment sort of thing. So I have ADHD, so some of these questions can derail. I try to show how we can have chat without people sort of, I do try to interact as best I can, but I'm not across the story with Kanye. I will talk about censorship and mass media, but my main point is actually around the legal process and the role of the legal process. I tend not to engage in this sort of celebrity gossip because that's the role of the idiot mass media. Okay, I'm someone who actually knows like the interactions between tech and politics and law. So that's where I'm going. So in terms of what I think about Kanye West, don't give a shit. I don't care. It's just he doesn't have political power, and so I'm not worried. Okay, if he's somehow elected president of the United States, then it becomes an issue. But until then, I think we need to look at. Yes, media has power. Okay, yes, celebrities have influence, but at the same time, they shouldn't. They are not the smartest sources of information. Even journalists or even YouTubers, don't listen to me. I happen to be qualified in a certain area. I apologize for my video. There's nothing I can do about it. I'll turn off the preview and see if that helps my performance. Unfortunately, there's just nothing I can do about this. You're just going to have to moan. Just one sec. Let me turn off the preview, see if that sort of... So from now on, I won't be able to even see if the video is bad. But I just get distracted. And I can't, it's an ADD thing. Anyone who's got ADD understands this. Enable preview, turn off. Okay. I've been putting off my hotkeys and all of those things because I need a new computer. There's no point doing the hotkeys. I know I can save settings, but there's just no point doing any of that stuff until I get a new computer. So feel free to become a patron at the top tier if you want to help. If you know what the top tier is, you'll think that's funny. It buys several computers. So anyway, look, one of the things, okay, so let's feed off of Kanye West, right? And my overall point, and even Andrew Tate, right? Someone like Andrew Tate, is that who cares what they do? They don't have political power. Yes, they have influence, but people only have as much influence as, I guess, culturally, we allow them to have, okay? Influence and celebrity and fame is not political power, okay? And I think that people tend to overstate. Like a lot of the research around celebrity, like influencers, right? Particularly influencers and how they can get people to change their minds or change votes. Or even changing brands, like with advertising. I think that these are things that people take as given or truisms, but they're not actually necessarily true. Like you can't actually show a lot of measurable influence, okay? A lot of it is just conjecture. A lot of it is around, like I said, media theory, media studies, cinema studies students who, assume that because they're impacted by something or that because, the science around parasocial relationships is around sort of, there's a certain psychological profile that goes with people being obviously heavily influenced by celebrities in terms of, purchasing behavior, but a lot of that is around when people are younger, when they're teenagers. A lot of it is around just like superficial things like consumerism or, when it comes to actually changing your vote or changing things, in a serious way or in terms of political opinions, changing hearts and minds politically, celebrities don't have a whole lot of influence, okay? Again, qualifier, it depends. It always depends, okay? So I will get to my Andrew Tate thing. So let's just How about we assume that this is my stream and I'll answer things as soon as I get to them. Topic of the video is Andrew Tate and the argument against censorship. So if I'm given a second to actually get there, you might be new, so I do chats a little differently. Thankfully, because I have the luxury of them being a little quieter, which is good, and I hide it. I just sort of sit here in my little corner. This is just so people know, because this is just something that I've observed with a lot of other busier, more popular live streams, is that, like, again, because I look at online behaviour and stuff, is that it makes it very difficult to interact seriously with things. And again, I'm not saying you're not. This is just a general qualifier to make, explain if someone thinks I'm being a rude asshole with chats. It's actually not. It's just being assertive around what I need, but also just trying to model certain behavior around how it is actually hard to get a good response in, or a good engagement with a written chat and a streamer. If sort of people are just hammering questions, you can't, I can't process that. And anyone who, like Hassan Piker is like a miracle worker. He might get I don't know how he does that. Like, I'm super online like him. Obviously I'm a bit older than him, so a little slower, but he that processing speed thing is, anyway, it makes for a shitty replay if I get distracted. So I will answer soon. Thank you for joining me. I very much appreciate it. I don't know who you are. Thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to explain that. Sometimes when people wander in and I'm, even older people, when I sort of push back or I say certain things, I'm not being rude. It's just that I've watched back my streams and I've noticed which ones go well, which are the ones and the ones that go well are ones where I, first of all, care about what I'm talking about. And second of all, and this might be a lesson for anyone else who's, this is just on record, but this is also just lessons, learnings, my little corner, just being on the record because I don't have time to write, okay? But streams that go well for me, personally, I don't care about views or, obviously, I don't care about those sorts of metrics because those are easily gamed, right? But what makes me happy in terms of what I think looks like a good stream is when I care about what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about, and I'm not sort of derailed with chat and back and forth and questions, especially when people can't see the fucking chat window, which was what the problem was a minute ago. So anyway, I will get there. Okay, so I'm anti-censorship. Okay, generally, and this is where I think we have to get away from 1-0 thinking around censorship. We can't expect old ideas and old tools to be that they can teach you and we can learn from, like, older problems. Like, a lot of the problems, I mean, if you watch my old stuff, a lot of the problems that we're going through at the moment mirror somewhat what the UK especially went through with the printing press, okay? We went through this problem of sort of yellow journalism. We went through this idea that, when everyone had access, with literacy, so everyone had access to being able to read and write. So that sort of, what's the words that I'm thinking of? Whatever. It opened up, removed gatekeepers. So, usually you'd have to know someone who could read or who could write, or, you'd need a scribe if the working class generally couldn't read and write, so we've got this evolution over time. This is just a new version of those same things, right? Where greater access, people find a loophole, they find a way around it, and then they, eventually we plug the holes in the leaky bucket of complexity and we find creative ways to do it. And I think that's part of the thing where, especially with, in the context of the Twitter files, in the context of, Trump's election, a lot of the things that I've been talking about over the years, I talked about this with the last stream and the sort of smoking gun idea, or that the Twitter files are kind of like my little Galapagos finch. A lot of the things that I've been talking about, but obviously you can't prove because a lot of it's internal. And if I was to go internal to get access to the information, I'd be under a non-disclosure agreement, so I wouldn't be able to do it. So the net game with the Twitter files is to give some transparency around some of these things that we haven't been able to prove because it's opaque. Okay, so if that's the problem with, I think, a lot of people in tech in particular, is that, well, not in particular, but and it's not unique to tech, but the second that you're in the know, you're usually working for a big tech company or as a vendor. In my case, mostly as a vendor, or you're an employee, or you're someone who just signed an NDA because you took a meeting. Like, a lot of it is just, you can't actually disclose. So something like the Twitter files being released is really useful for transparency. And what that, and there's no gatekeepers around that information, which is good. I prefer it all be released, but I'm who knows? But there's the lack of transparency there has been the problem, and the reason why it's important is because, like I said, like researchers. If you look at the other side of this, which is that researchers, policymakers, politicians, even movie studios and all those things, they've used Twitter data sets, but they've used them in a way it's not manual, right? They use the way that, if you've ever done a data science course, you will see that, you're only as good as any data science or any stats are only as good as, the way you approach with the data itself and how clean the data is. And a lot of that stuff is really messy, really hard to use, okay? And it will come back to Andrew Tate because, again, the pizza box thing actually didn't happen. A lot of it was that it was, see, the police don't move until they've got enough evidence, okay? That's just one of those things. Again, due process, legal process. We'll get there. But the thing about the audio won't be synced. I've said it. It isn't just you. I have an old computer. Feel free to buy me a new one. So I can't do anything about it. I've downgraded everything. It's just, we're going to have to deal with it. So apologies. There's not much I can do about it until, it's just, don't have it. So I'm still just soldering on. It tends to get better. So let me just do this too. Hang on, I'll just stop. Maybe the local host server might kill. That's using a bit of, my computer's at end of life. There's nothing I can do. And a new computer that I need is $5,000. So if you got $5,000, give it to me. Otherwise, the audio is going to be off. So, if you've streamed and done anything like that, you'll know how resource intensive a lot of these things are. Okay. So now, let me know if that actually fixes the stream. I'll watch it back anyway. So what was I saying? Okay. So So Twitter files, Andrew Tate. Like transparency, right? The fact that it's out in the public space. Like, that's where I'm sort of going. If you're one of those sort of idiot brains that needs a 7 top tips stream and 7 top tips video, then this isn't the place for you. You can go somewhere else. Go watch someone else who's media trained. I don't have media training. I'm just talking about it from a policy point of view. So, we meander. We hang out. Also, it's early in the morning. And also, I had medicinal brownie last night, and I'm not a habitual consumer of things like that. So I'm a little... Anyway, so Andrew Tate, that first of all, it's really interesting how misinformation can travel, and it's really funny actually, because this whole the people who want to criminalize misinformation and want censorship, it's very interesting to watch that sort of about face that occurs when it's your side. Like, obviously, I'm a lefty and I laugh. I have no problem with Greta Thunberg. I don't think, I think that the harassment of her is unwarranted. I think it's creepy. I think the same way that these dickheads harass AOC, it's kind of creepy, right? It comes from again, when you understand the basic psychology, you go, well, what's wrong with you that you feel the need to do these things? Okay, you might rationalize it, and you might think that it's okay, and you might, like anything. You got to look within. The first thing you got to do is look at why you behave the way that you behave, why you see things the way that you see things. Okay, it's not absolute. Nothing is black and white. And trying to see things from multiple points of view is, I think, that's probably the biggest mark of actual intelligence. Being able to memorize and parrot facts about one particular issue doesn't necessarily make you intelligent. It means you've got a good memory, okay? But being able to sort of, see things from other people's point of view, distill lots of different ideas into maybe a slightly different take on things, or, slightly different perspective. Now, in terms of censorship, that was my argument before, which was that a lot of these problems aren't new problems. Like everyone's just acting like these are all new problems, and they're not, okay? They're symptoms of deep-rooted, bigger, more complex problems, okay, which is around globalization, okay, 8 billion people trying to coexist on a handful of different platforms that are dominated by the United States, that are dominated with United States political interests. And, Americans who watch have no fucking idea we joke about America. I love Americans. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with America because politically I have no time for it. I think it's, really just a rotten military dictatorship that would be, I don't think many people outside of America would be very sad if America collapsed. That said, I love Americans, I love the history of America, and I love the ideals behind America. And this is where we get into censorship and free speech, which is that, even though the letter of the law is there, first of all, the interpretation of the law is dog shit anyway. But it's always more complicated. But, we're in a process where things take like a decade to get through the courts to be decided. Things are decided mostly through case law and through test cases and rulings. And, we're just in part of that cycle. And I think that when you look at the history of, like, say, the printing press, where everybody had access, you had, the history, look up actually the history of yellow journalism in the United States, because that's where we get journalism standards from now, and, media standards, right? Which is that it started out of this, this problem of sort of everyone having access and just printing bullshit. Back before the internet, you had, Weekly World News and National Enquirer, and, Weekly World News was hilarious. So I loved it. But there's people who read those sorts of publications and took them as true, and people are going to take those things as true. And this is, these are the same conversations, okay? So should children have access to these things when they don't have the critical thinking capacity or the maturity? But again, it's a case-by-case basis, because there's a lot of adults who aren't that clever or aren't that intelligent. Do we have the right to determine what adults see, even if they're not intelligent? Whose role is that? And I think when we're talking about things like censorship and misinformation particularly, but also figures like Andrew Tate, who, do influence a large group of boys, it strikes me that he's getting the same sort of the Jordan Peterson treatment. Anybody who has been online, especially in online marketing or working in digital for any length of time, Andrew Tate just represents the same way that Trump represented that sort of collision between Hollywood media, Wall Street and politics in America. He was a symptom of American politics. Andrew Tate sort of represents the same sort of, and I'm not comparing the two because they're obviously different, everything depends, but Andrew Tate, for those who don't know, he kind of embodies a lot of the things that are wrong with the internet, much like Donald Trump sits in the cracks of everything that's sort of wrong with the internet, with the media, the news. He sort of broke that stuff apart and sort of highlighted that. If you're paying attention, these things happen throughout history, which is, there's one thing, Marx would have said that, there's one common thread through history, which is class struggle. But I would also argue there's one common thing through history, which is that fucking grift is going to grift and loopholes going to, people are going to find loopholes, and we've just got to keep plugging those holes, right? And so this is where the argument around censorship becomes, stupid, right? Again, like there's lines, there's degrees, it depends on the issue. I tend to, when you're talking about, especially like a constitution, right, or something like that, or those sorts of documents, values document for your business, or even who you are, okay, you're not going to live up to them all the time. It's actually not feasible to live up to your values all the time. I try to do it more than most, but most people are good. They just have different values, okay? They're oriented in a certain direction. Okay, what they prioritize is different, and it's the same thing for functioning society. I think being absolute about speech means you don't. Well, first of all, really don't know what you're talking about. Second of all, it kind of dismisses the complexity of the problem. Now, I'm saying that there is actually, Andrew Tate is an example in why online censorship is bad, okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean that free speech should be absolute. It's just that the tech company shouldn't be deciding that. It's that there is a process already in place for these things, and that is, not just the criminal courts, but also civil courts, right? And I'm going to talk about defamation in particular. Now, I apologise for my voice. My upper register has sort of tapped out because of some illness that I've got. So it's a little bit crackly, more crackly than usual. But this is where I'm trying to level up thinking around this stuff, because it's easy to sit behind your phone and scream that free speech is absolute. It's harder when there's a measurable harm or a measurable or immediate danger, right? And Andrew Tate, again, sits at the example of that. I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I had two thoughts at once. Then I remembered I wanted to say something else, and then I forgot what I was going to say, and then I forgot both. Must be a Saturday morning. Okay. But Elon Musk is finding this out too, which is that it's one thing to say you're a free speech absolutist, and it's another thing to try and apply it, okay? And it's a lot trickier than you'd think, especially when, I think this is where you've got to get away from, and I think this is what you learn in, I didn't finish law school, but I did enough law to know that I've talked about this before, where there is the letter of the law, okay? And even then, sometimes they really only fall back on dictionary definitions. Like legal arguments are, fought and won and lost on the semantics all the time. But people forget about the golden rule, which is that when you're interpreting the law, the intention and the context of that law matters as much as anything else, right? And so that's just a fundamental principle of law, rule of law. So when people I think this is the gross misinterpretation of legal principles. And these are schools of thought. Like you've got your constitutionalists who are like literal letter of the law and only that and only that. But then you've got, one of the themes going through my channel is that things are a lot more complicated than they appear, okay? People who are media trained and do 30-second bites will never, ever be able to fully capture the complexity of a problem, because policies interact with other policies conflict with other policies, people act, you come from a presumption that people are trying to do the right thing for the most part. I tend to not have a cynical view of people. I tend to believe that most people are doing what they think is best, okay? Even if it's rationalising, violent behaviour, it is just something that people are doing their best with the tools that they've got under a structure that incentivises them to behave in certain ways. You can't blame the individual in a poisonous system. All things being equal, okay, once you fix systemic issues, then you can look at character, then you can look at temperament, then you can look at those things and blame people. But, anyone who's done any kind of deep research on these things knows that temperament is sort of only part of it. Environment is, a larger part of it. So poverty and capitalism and all those sort of structures do actually affect behaviour and affect your personality in the long run, okay? So it's not all about, this is that American Puritan bullshit where the individual is responsible, because if you actually had to look at, structures, then that's just an individualist culture like America. Like we're the same here, but we still at least have, we're not afraid of our neighbour, right? Whereas in America, it's just extremely hyper-individual, focused on the nuclear family. It's very focused on me, mine, and, So that's just a cultural difference. But also, which is that to blame the individual for structural problems, okay, much like with Andrew Tate, Trump, even Elon Musk, billionaires, every psycho on Twitter, okay? If you're blaming the individual, okay, first of all, that's an inherently right-wing worldview, by the way, okay? Left-wing worldview is to look at how how we get there, how that person got there, what the circumstances were, you know, and how we can help them move forward, you know, what kind of support they need, that sort of thing. That's a left-wing policy point of view, okay? This is where people get confused about right and left. And this is why when I've maintained that this woke mind virus eye roll is, you know, inherently a right-wing thing, it's like people are very confused about the political spectrum. But anyway, we'll move on. That's a fight that I will keep fighting for the rest of days. And if I had to fight that misinformation, if every piece of misinformation about politics was removed from the internet, nobody would ever be on the internet. Okay. But that's also something where I think it's good to be in an industry where you know a lot about something that there's general ignorance about. Politics is one and tech is another. So mine happen to intersect very heavily with Dunning-Kruger shit all the time, okay? And I get people yelling at me all the time about censorship bad, free speech absolutist, you know, and it's like, but they don't really have any understanding about the visibility, about the difficulties, because we've really got a real problem of artificial traffic. We've got bots. We've got, you know, like no offense to you, True Dreamer TV, but, you know, my impulse is to assume that it's a bot because of what I do. It's like it's a lot higher than you'd think, okay? I think it's safe to assume that sort of someone who jumps in very quickly with certain talking points is trying to do something. And again, that's just a heuristic thing because of what I do. Is that a correct one? Probably not, but it's just something that you've got to use. Otherwise, anyway. But that's a real problem. We've got the problem of spam and we've got the problem of scamming. Now, this is where we come in with Andrew Tate. Because again, like I said, anyone who's been on the internet for fucking more than 5 years, especially around the hustle, like the business startup scene or the tech scene or, you know, the small business scene or coaching in particular. Like I've, you know, touched all of these things over the years. And, you know, Andrew Tate is just an extreme version of those sort of affiliate marketer, red pill, you know, just, well, troll, comedian, attention seeker, you know, it's just, he's just figured out his little niche, okay. Now, where I think for me the line is with, actually with the Hustle University side of things, okay. And so he's found obviously, and this is something that I've been talking about for years and years and years and years. And it's something that I pushed for. And I ran for, we've got the local web organisation here, which was the Web Industry Association. Don't know how active they are now, but in the early days, like, gosh, this was 2000, it wasn't that early actually, it was 2005, because I went pro in 2005, but I'd been obviously doing websites for them. So I went pro in 2005, so I started to get involved in that stuff. And I ran for that as a committee member, for that organisation. And I actually lost. I ran on the basis of the fact that that organisation should be setting standards, ethical standards, professional standards, quality standards, you know, all that sort of stuff for web designers and digital agencies. Like that's something that, you know, we should be setting a benchmark, okay. I ran on that. I had immense support. All of the good guys wanted it, but you've got these shadowy agencies who do dark patterns, you know, dark marketing, dark psychology, all those sort of manipulative tactics. You know, they sell their MLM, fucking squeeze. I'm doing a squeeze page at the moment for my course, and I break out in hives at these squeeze pages because they're by nature, you know, manipulative, right? And so as a UX person and you know, across politics, it sucks being in both worlds because one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. So when you see sort of that holistic problem, or the holistic problem, when you look at the problem sort of from both angles, you go, fuck me. I need to do a squeeze page because that's what you got to do to get the fucking thing. But I also don't want to do that because that contributes to the dark patterns of the problem. So that's the thing where it's like everyone has one idea about things, but when you've got to sort of jump out and look at it from others' perspectives. And so from a legal perspective, okay, this is good. Things like speech and the internet, the governments are behind, okay, in terms of legislation. They have been for decades. They should have been having these conversations a decade ago. The thing that's been really interesting to me is how suddenly it's urgent to regulate big tech because they can't control it anymore because Twitter's gone loose. Twitter's gone rogue, okay? That I find very fascinating because, and that was actually in Toby's last one. That was shown as well, which was that they seem to enjoy the threat of regulation much more than actually regulating, because once you start to regulate these things, there has to be they have to report. They have to report back. They have to, once it becomes within the public realm and there's a regulator, there's some, you have to report. There's more. There has to be more transparent. If you use this is where it's very fascinating, like this whole capitalism, this US capitalist structure, which is that they use private business as proxy so that they can become a black box. So that's where, a lot of these sort of dodgy AI, this is something that government have been doing. I suspect this is really boring. This is really boring tech stuff, okay? But with the data sets, right? I think what a lot of government would, anyway, I'll move. No, I'm sorry. I'm sitting here deciding whether to go on that tangent. I'm not going to go on that tangent. But what you need to know is that an easy way for government to get out of responsibility and to sort of, have that plausible deniability and still censor speech is to use vendors and contractors and suppliers and, like I said at the beginning of the stream about, get all of those suppliers and contractors under NDAs so that there's layers and layers of confidentiality, but you don't then, that becomes a black box. And I've talked about how digital agencies can be used to manipulate elections in that regard, which is that, I used to run one and I obviously didn't do this. I just know that if I had no scruples and unlimited budget and all of those things, this is how I would do it. So that means if I can assume, if I know how to do it and I can achieve it, that means someone without scruples is definitely doing it. And that's where the Twitter stuff has been really interesting because it validates a lot of what I've been saying in terms of the internal process. I know the internal processes of a couple of other tech companies, but I didn't know Twitter. I just extrapolated what was going on there. But that's been really interesting because, governments can just sort of, the digital agencies can exist and just have multiple clients, right? So they can have a government department as a client. They can have, a bunch of not-for-profits as a client. They can have all these. And they've sort of got this private company, right? In the US, it's an LLC. And in Australia, it would be, a limited company. And they don't have to report on these things. Unless you're a publicly traded company, you don't have to report, okay? So this is what I've figured out that they'd done years ago, which is they set up all these little businesses that have like 10 clients. And those clients all pay in a retainer, okay? And that then becomes, some sort of ad spend account, okay? So it's a pooled amount of money that then goes out into Facebook ads, goes out into PPC, troll farms. They use troll farms, if not run their own, all those sorts of things. And this is just, it's an easy, I can't even imagine how, that's something that I could easily set up. If I already had the business structure in place, even without the business structure, because it only takes like an hour to set that up, would be, a week's work to set something up, a pop-up, easy, okay? You have 10 different businesses who aren't allowed to associate with each other, so a government department, government departments have a bit more scrutiny, but, like a not-for-profit, other bunch of other companies, some data companies, and then you just pull that stuff, okay? Then what you do is you use those CRMs like ActBlue and WinRed to harvest all of the data from those different companies and cross-reference it, and you've got a burn book on everybody, okay? That's sort of how it roughly would work. If you're a bad guy, you don't care about the ethical use of data or AI or bots or anything like that, then, that's half a day's work. I think that's the big shift for people, which is to acknowledge that is a real problem. It's a quantifiable, measurable problem. Actually, someone mentioned me on Twitter the other day about Matt Walsh having fewer views than likes, okay, on his tweets. And that's funny because introducing the ability to see how many people have viewed it has exposed some of these ratios, which is that's one of the signals that they're likely using a either a bot. It's probably scripted. It's scripted without viewing, but but that you can only like it via the API without viewing the tweet. That's going to throw off those metrics, and just so suddenly making views available. Because that's not actually views. I don't think are actually available in the lower level developer API. So it's really interesting stuff. Anyway, but these things are real problems. They are best dealt with sunlight. Okay, they are best dealt with transparency. And the real takeaway from a lot of this Twitter stuff is that, which is that governments have been avoiding using the threat of regulation to coerce sort of social media into compliance, which I knew was happening because tech people just, they mean well. I've talked about this before on previous streams, but, it's just not, it never really fit with me that tech's the fall guy for a lot of these failures of government. And I say that as someone who, is generally pro-regulation, pro-government. I think that the, anarcho-capitalist view of the world is retarded and not realistic. Some things just you need governments to run them, okay? But this idea that government are using the threat of regulation rather than actually regulating, there's an indication there that, and also with all the layers of organisations, all those sorts of things that Graphica, those data, all of those sorts of things, right? What they're doing is avoiding scrutiny, public scrutiny. And so this is where it comes back to Andrew Tate and what happened with the Greta Thunberg interaction, which was funny, by the way. It was brilliant. It was bullshit. Didn't happen that way, but it was brilliant. So the Romanian police have said, right, from what I can tell, I can't, not native, so but I looked at some sources. Ben Dreyfus actually was the first one to mention this, and I think a couple of others have since, that it was actually not the pizza box. It was just, timing. I think they said that it was a combination of different things in social media because he was saying where he was in various places and, all that stuff. So he was known to them for a while and he's been, anyway, but people just ran with this idea that Greta Thunberg got him to self-dox, which is a funny story, but it's not entirely true. So anyway, I just want to make sure that people know that it wasn't entirely true. Funny. And her tweets were funny, but, it's not true. Didn't happen that way. Also knowing that law would segue into law. So law enforcement sort of don't move in unless, I think this is something that I think people don't know, is that most of the time police won't move because, they won't move unless they've got enough to make the charges stick. Because especially in America, I mean, obviously this was Romania, but, generally when you're talking about the law and the police and law enforcement at a base level, usually, and, assuming no corruption, all those things, is that the police get one shot to arrest you. Okay, when they charge you, they need to have, just cause to do that, and they need enough evidence to bring a case. Otherwise, they're just wasting resources, right? And that's so even if and that's the thing about, I think, even with internet speech, where people getting a knock on the door for speech and those sorts of things. I think that's going to tease itself out. But a lot of that is testing the law. Testing the limits of the law. It's a good thing because the more times that happens, the more times you get to appeal in court and the more times you get to a superior court so they can make a decision, and that becomes binding law with the rest of the courts. It may be non-binding in other countries like, the United States. All law is non-binding because, it's the United States and people facts don't matter and laws don't matter and nothing matters. It's just what people think, and whoever owns the Washington Post that week is the person who decides what the law is. But obviously in America it's different because you've got clear factions or sects, as I've talked about, trying to fight for narrative rather than for due process and those sorts of principles. So I'd argue that a lot of these principles of due process, principles of rule of law, I think that internet censorship and a First Amendment argument, yes, at this point, it's a claim. It is a hypothesis. It has not been as yet tested in court. So, we're flying blind a bit, right? We've got precedent, yes. But, I think people need to be clear on the fact that just because you think it's a ruling, it hasn't been ruled on, okay? It might be, it may well be, but no, you're stating your argument for the case. It's not a given, okay? So that's one thing worth saying. But also in terms of defamation, for example, okay, you've got defamation laws different. Like it's obviously different here. In Australia now, they don't really differentiate between slander and libel. The burden of proof is different than it is in the United States. But, this is where I think there's a good cancel fuck argument, okay? If you're a greedy cancel fuck who's only trying to get clout and get rich, then censorship doesn't make any sense then, because you know why? Because the more people someone defames you to, the higher the damages. It doesn't make any sense, does it? So what we need, I think, is reform of defamation. We need to make defamation law more accessible, okay? We need to make it so that it's not just something that the rich can do, which is something where maybe, and this is where I think things are in conflict, which is that, you go, I don't like the government, fuck the government do everything, and then they complain about things that would easily be solved with regulation. Okay, which is that, the role of government is to make sure that people are following the process correctly, that there is a process to change those agreed things. And that's just the process that we've all agreed to. And anyone who's trying to sort of circumvent that, I don't trust. Okay, whether that's the right-wingers who are trying to flood everything with shit so nobody knows what's true, trying to just passing bogus legislation and test cases and flooding the lower courts constantly in bad faith to try and get, all of these. Yeah, anyway, just look at what's going on in the fucking circuit courts, right? And or the role of lobbyists or the role of these things are complicated, right? And it often is a case-by-case thing. But every single time you've got to be oriented towards truth. You've got to be oriented towards the principles enshrined in a constitution. But when you actually are faced with a proper, real, complex problem, there's no absolutes. Most of the things just exist as cleavages like this. They're just constant tension, right? Constant tension, and then it needs to be managed. It's not going to be solved. It needs to be managed, okay? It's much like people who still think that, with cancer, okay, there's stages. There comes a stage where the cancer has just so compromised the body that it's just something that can be managed rather than solved. Unless you're sort of willing to start over and build from the ground up, which I would not advocate, given, the implications of what's actually required to do that is, not ideal. I tend to be a reformist, okay? But if you're going to reform it, you need to know, first of all, what the problems are that need reforming. You need the resources to do that. Now, how you allocate resources is obviously a problem. Who's involved in doing that? Well, technically, everyone has the right to be involved in that process, okay? This is the process in any democracy that everyone has agreed to, okay? Now, the confusion with tech is that tech somewhat supersedes that, okay? That's been a narrative sold, especially to sort of millennials, which is that tech is a way to disrupt everything, disrupt government, disrupt, your blog can disrupt the mainstream media, but you don't have to be held to any standards. The media are now dragged to compete with bloggers, okay? Some bloggers are better journalists than mainstream media journalists because of the chase for ads and the conflict of interest when it comes to, this known government interference by proxy, okay? This is what I find really interesting, which is there's this proxy war on speech and proxy war on the internet. And I've been talking about this, obviously it's been taken over the period of sort of the last, we had a good run for about 20 years and then got more aggressive sort of a decade ago. And it's this is just the culmination of many, many different things. But Andrew Tate, obviously sits there in that little cleavage, so to speak, or the gaps, okay? And he's sort of found another exploit, which is an MLM targeting vulnerable, again, young boys who are in their formative years, also in the context of a cancel culture thing, right? And so you can't ignore the fact that a lot of these boys are experiencing sort of, they're trying to figure out who they are. I think this Andrew Tate stuff is just sort of the other side of, the kind of thing that Jamila Jamil would build. Like, it's just another version of this sort of Tumblr feminism, like, bullshit, okay, versus, Andrew Tate. But then you've got, Andrew Tate's sort of a less political version, I think, of, is sort of that Donald Red Pill 4chan. Again, I'm generalizing, of course, because these streams are long enough and I ramble enough. But Andrew Tate sort of represents sort of that hustle bro, red pill sort of collision, right? Perfect storm. So, but, I don't consider him harmless either, because the research does, again, it's just more, it depends, because his audience are young men, okay? Now, we have the same thing with Jordan Peterson, which is the argument that he helps a lot of young men. And it's like, well, that's a good thing. But young men can access that information elsewhere. Now, will they? Who knows? Okay. I happen to think that, despite, obviously, he's a streamer. But if you're going to get to streamers, I do like, people like Hassan Piker, who will not just immediately castigate and berate someone who's got a shitty view, but actually, take people on that journey and catch them where they're at and that sort of thing, right? And Andrew Tate will do that. But that's the thing, is that where you catch people, catching them here at the same point, like I would argue that every time someone finds a new streamer that, they like, it doesn't matter where they are, okay, on the political spectrum per se, I think most people start in relatively the same place. So people who are vulnerable, I think people who are vulnerable to radicalization generally fit a psych profile and also, have a certain set of social circumstances, okay? So there's a case to be made for the fact that somebody who is vulnerable and online and escaping online is vulnerable to any kind of radicalization funnel. It doesn't matter what it is. You're likely meeting them all when they're all roughly in the same place, which is malleable. They have a certain worldview. Now, some would be more inclined to sort of the sort of woke social justice stuff. Some will be more inclined towards sort of the gamer, the toxic gaming stuff. Some will be more inclined towards someone like Andrew Tate. Some will be more inclined towards, that sort of alt-right stuff. So, or Tim Pool. They have an appeal, or Hassan Piker or whatever. They all meet these creators at roughly the same point in their lives if they're going to be radicalized, okay? I think that's the thing, is that that's something that seems to get lost quite a bit, which is that a lot of the information is not necessarily about the good information that the person is getting on first contact, but where they go, the journey they go on after that, with a combination of making friends in the community and going off to like-minded communities, okay? So that's the problem with the alt-right, which is that it's not necessarily, those sort of smiling face of the IDW people that are necessarily the problem. I find them quite stupid and tedious, right? But they are a gateway, and Tim Pool is a gateway to, those are absolute, measured, known things. Now, the degree in which that is a problem varies, okay? Now, big life, whether it's like buying stuff or the reason why people buy things is incredibly complex, okay? And so when we're talking about political views are even harder to change than buying behaviours, okay? Because the stakes are higher, and a lot of it really, if you're taking politics seriously, a lot of it is linked to your worldview. And your worldview is linked to your, things that are pretty hardwired, and a combination of that plus experiences. I think because I've been someone who's worked in campaigning, right, and getting people to change their minds for it's easy to sell people a fucking, toothpaste. Okay. It's easy to sell people on switching, like brands of the same product. It's very, very difficult to get them to change like ingrained habits. It's very difficult to get them to change ideology or, experience, unless you're sort of replacing it. This is part of why cult psychology is about disconnection, because most people who have a good, social connections, okay, generally may not fall into a cult because there's that. But, part of the reason why cults isolate you, or even abusers, right, isolate you from your family is because they're the first sort of, sanity check on a lot of what's being told. But also the fact that it's easier to change your mind when you've got a whole new set of heuristics. Okay, so a lot of it is to sort of, reboot, control, alt, delete your fucking, experiences and social proof and all those, social proof, your surroundings, all of those things. And then because of your predisposition or life circumstances, you sort of walk away from your family and friends, and then you suddenly, they start sort of reprogramming that. And that's why you'll see people who are in cults, whether they're online. Okay, so being radicalized online is like disappearing offline. Being addicted, an addiction is basically another form of disconnection, right? So obviously I'm not an addiction specialist. I'm just sort of summarizing and talking shit. But, this is just I understand internet addiction stuff. And it's just another form of sort of, isolating you, disconnecting you, creating curating an experience for you that is a new heuristic for you to determine what the world is, helps your worldview, okay? And that's an immense responsibility. So as a user experience person, for me, I've always taken that responsibility very seriously, especially for kids, which is that, when you're controlling what people see and what they consume and what information they have, especially when they're young, that stuff imprints, okay? And it's very difficult to deprogram. Anyone who has been sort of had a massive change of mind or change of worldview, or even just moved to a completely different culture, or somehow been, been in a cult or left a religion or any of those things, right? Know how hard it is and how traumatic it can be and how desperately you want it to not be the case, right? And so these things are tricky. And so someone like Andrew Tate it's not about Andrew Tate necessarily, and it's not about individuals, okay? It's about making sure that people know that it's going in as, this is why my course, this is the only solution that I can think of, is to reach influencers about the responsibility that they've got. Now, that responsibility is mixed. Now, if you're measuring, so some of the studies with influence, right, is that it's not really measurable beyond, lipstick. Like the Kardashians sell dumb shit, okay, but do they nudge the needle or move the needle in terms of politically? I doubt it. Like, it's pretty clear that Kim Kardashian is a Republican, right? But she, wokies still love her. There's all these. Anyway, side point. But someone's influence it depends, and it depends on their offline influence. I think this is where there's a conflict, okay, which is that people have agency, yes, okay. But you only have this is the same thing as like rational choice theory in economics. This idea that you choose, you make a rational decision based on utility that, this product is better than the other product. But that ignores advertising, okay? It ignores emotion, right? Trying to get anyone to like change their lifestyle or change their buying habits or, exercise regularly. For me, it's like trying to, push past my pain to exercise, right? That's one thing that trying to form those habits is incredibly difficult. And I think and that's why, these nudges exist. But what we've got to be doing is nudging people in. I think the problem that we've got is that you've got all these creators, and it doesn't matter really what they are, okay? It doesn't matter whether it's ISIS or fucking, the Taylor Lorenz camp of like cancel fucks. It doesn't matter if it's Andrew Tate. It doesn't matter if it's Trump supporters. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter, okay? Or COVID nutters or whatever. What does matter is that you are constantly trying to pull people away from those extremes. And that's not centrism. I'm talking about emotional, mental, sort of radicalized extremes. Like anybody who's observed the culture wars sees that pathway play out time and time again. Okay? Glenna's back on Twitter. Okay? Look, I've just had to back away. I tried to support. I tried to just get him. But some people just can't be reached. I tried to reach him early and repeatedly, but now he's just on that train, right? It's just fucking lost it. And you can only do so much. But the same thing, you kind of got to intervene a bit earlier when people are more open to different ideas. And so this is where the appeal of Diane's cats jumped on the keyboard. Anyway, so I know I rambled a little bit, but see the problem with censorship. So this is the case against censorship, which is what happened. Well, okay, assuming that this happened, okay, which it didn't happen quite this way, but it does warrant pause, which was that Andrew Tate was deplatformed by everybody. And I'm of the view, like I've said this before, give people enough rope and they'll be their own undoing. Because the thing about social media is that, it's designed to short circuit our impulse control. So if people are really the way they are, they'll overreach. They'll go too far. That's but that's when legal process kicks in. So for me, I was sitting there. It was really interesting. This is what it has is it's affirmed. You can't have it both ways. You can't be anti-big tech censorship and then making the decision, and then anti-big government, okay? What's your solution, okay? You need the courts. You need regulation. You need laws, okay? That's the process that has been proven to work. And I think that for those that are sort of gotten libertarian brain rot, right, who call everything that is a necessary law in order for everyone to coexist and put the brakes on their scams, is somehow authoritarian or communism. First of all, that's stupid. But second of all, it doesn't benefit you because you can't have it both ways. You can't have big tech not doing content moderation. And from what I can see, Twitter have been under immense pressure and they actually did the best they could do given the circumstances. I imagine that if I was under that kind of pressure, I wouldn't have really done much differently. I would have taken the turf wars. I would have taken certain issues more seriously and taken more of a stand with those from a policy point of view. But the pressure that they're under is immense. Okay, Yoel Roth comes out looking great. In that, if you work in tech, it's like, well, he has shown time and time again that he has tried really hard to push back. And I think that people need to be careful about where they lay the blame, which is that government haven't bothered to legislate. They were using the threat of regulation rather than actually regulating. Most of the people, if you've watched any of these Senate hearings or committee hearings or anything like that, they know fuck all about tech. They don't understand content moderation, and most of them have been elected off the back of this model of troll farms, bots, and digital agencies that are corrupt. And this is the kind of work that I've been talking about time and time and time and time again. The thing that I lost that election over, which was that the dodgy agencies joined up and crowded me out and said, they replaced someone else. They put someone who didn't want there to be standards around web design and web practices, okay, marketing. This is the problem of unregulated industry, okay? I've been in industries that are unregulated for a very long time. Okay, and I eventually had to quit because I could not compete because it is an absolute mess. Web3 is the same at the moment, but Web3 is just the same thing as Web2. It's just next gen. I've been through all of this before. Okay, we had a good time with the internet. It was unregulated for a while. Corporates took over. They declared war on, the big four record labels and movie studios and everyone declared war on the internet, as did, Rupert Murdoch. And the rest is history. A few fuck-ups, dodgy people, right? Fucked it up for everybody. And most internet users who do the right thing or use it as a tool or don't leave the big four apps, which is something that people need to really think about as well, which is that your experience is extremely heavily curated if you only visit social media if you're only on your phone and only using apps. That's something that, you should do more worldwide webbing, so to speak, right? Try to get away from those portals, okay? Because that was part of the problem, which is that your information is curated. But the problem is that outside of that curation exists a wild west where, because our attention spans and education levels and literacy levels are now so low compared to, America, my God. So there's lots of those quizzes, those surveys and stuff where they can't name the Supreme Court, the justice. Most Australians don't even know that Australia doesn't have a Bill of Rights. They just, they don't understand the Constitution. They don't know certain basics levels of government, let alone the intricacies of censorship. Okay, there's just, most people don't even know how policy works. And you've got all these people online, again, with all of these, they've got lots of answers for the toughest of issues, but they don't know what they're talking about because they don't understand that these things are going to take 10 years. Being arrested over speech is a good thing because it means you get to go to court. That's the trigger. That's what you need. You need a case because it's the process, okay? I've been sort of goading these things for a long time. I'm going back and forth about whether I sue Twitter over the last few years with my account. But again, this comes back to what I was saying about the defamation law, which is that you need evidence. And so this is the wokies argument for, honestly, I think defamation law needs reform so that it's more accessible. I said that before. But, that these things need to be out in public because you can't get evidence. And also with defamation, you can't prove, okay, so this is part of the reason why I think a lot of people are pro-memory holding or pro-censorship or removing these sorts of things. Like this, I think this is mostly Taylor or Lorenza's motive. I don't think it's necessarily, it's ass covering for herself, okay? So it's because they engage in defamation all the time. So they want to be able to cover their tracks, okay? Because I think the people who are most sinister in this space, they know the law, they know the loopholes because they're psychos. Psychos know the law, they know the loopholes, they find them. Good people don't. We've spent years and we had no idea. You go, every so often you go, well, fuck, okay, that's a cool exploit. I hadn't even thought of that. That's how good people think. Okay, and I'm pretty slippery and I can think about ways around things and I'm pretty smart, but even I sit there and I go, wow, that's an impressive exploit, okay? We're in the business of, especially in tech, but also with law and policy, there's always loopholes, okay? And so that's the problem that we find ourselves in. And it's like, well, you need to actually understand the law and you actually need to understand how things work in order to exploit those gaps. And so a lot of the people who enjoy defaming people, they want a process where they can cover their tracks, okay? So it might not even, see, this is something where I think maybe people haven't thought, which is, in the area of defamation law, you need to prove, if it was only let's just say if it was only a screenshot, so the burden of proof, technically you could subpoena the records, okay? Let's just move that aside, okay? But if you've only got a screenshot, okay, versus the actual live tweet, that could be, a very big difference in damages, okay? Because when you're looking at, when they're assessing damages, okay, in a defamation suit, for example, they look at the amount of harm that was done, the amount of reputational harm. So if it's been deleted and taken down and no one saw it, then, the defense could actually argue that they took it down so the harm was less. You want that shit to stay up, I do. First of all, okay, let's go back to business reviews 101 class from early. Facebook reviews, Google reviews. What do I do when someone gives me a bad review? Do you know what you do? You keep it up, you address it. You correct it, you correct the record, and you let the record stand. Okay, and the same thing applies for Andrew Tate, and that's where Greta comes in, okay? Because they're the people, all of the people that were advocating for Tate's deplatforming, they were actually doing it well this time by roasting him and making fun of him and seeing and calling him out for being the dickhead that he is. He became a laughing stock, okay? And even if technically the whole pizza box story wasn't true, funny, if it was true, it would be perfect. But it is actually another argument against censorship, which is the fact that people will come unstuck. People will make mistakes. People will, they'll slip up and eventually see consequences. It might not be immediate. See, this is, again, the instant gratification versus what actually works for everybody, this is the role of due process. This is the role of the courts. It's not just about whether you get arrested for speech. It's not that simple. But it's actually about letting things, if you're a good faith citizen, you'll sign up to the process and you will let the process, do its thing. Okay? Now, are there problems with that in terms of access, money, lawyers, abuse of power? Yeah, all those things. Same loopholes that always exist. But we just got to be plugging these gaps and plugging the loopholes and giving people greater access to quality, to justice, right? That's all it is. And also educating people about their own sort of responsibility. So the duty of influencers and, making sure that what they say is correct and what they pass on is good faith. That there's regulations and laws in place for that. Okay, whether it's self-regulating like journalism, but the journalism code of conduct, it's a good guideline. No one's following it, but that's because the rules broke with blogging, and the rules broke, and people. Yeah, anyway. But anyone who's taken a media ethics course, it's almost like Tim Pool hasn't trained in journalism, therefore hasn't sat through an ethics class. Seems like there's a problem there. Seems like you still should be a qualified journalist in order to be a journalist and have to sign up like this. And this happened, actually radio is a good example of this. I know I'm meandering, but radio is a good example of this, where you can't actually go on the airwaves. They're public airwaves. You can't go on without a radio license, first of all, okay? And second of all, you're not allowed to go on the air without your Cert 3, Cert 4 in broadcasting, okay? You have to do that as a compulsory. That teaches you the responsibility in front of the mic. It teaches you mic technique. It teaches you, all these things. Okay, this is something that people just don't realise, and I think that might be where we're heading in terms of it's not just about verification per se, but it's about, I think, that the ability to, as part of your process in the partner program, for example, it has to be conditional on certain conduct. Now, where that conduct is manipulated is obviously, that's been the concern. There's nothing necessarily wrong with their terms of service or Twitter's terms of service, or even the ability to moderate content, or even Section 230 or any of those things. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that process. What's happened is that process has been gamed and manipulated using subcontractors and loopholes and partnerships with government without any transparency, right? That we've got to name the real problem. It's like you can't just go, well, censorship, it can't happen. It's like, well, what's the solution? What's the next solution that you've got? Because let's go back to Kanye West, okay? Kanye West needs help. But anyone who's tried to help someone who's in a manic episode knows that you can't. It's really hard. And also, we can't determine even if he is. I'm just assuming he is. He looks like he is, but again, I'm not qualified to say that. But it's he may not be. It may be a media narrative, but the problem is that all of these things are it results in people ignoring the real issue, which is that any paper can bullshit about anything they want, and government can put out anything they want, and anyone deemed an enemy of the government or enemy of these corporations is able to suppress those voices and censor people. And we're not allowed to go out there and make mistakes. Now, if you're putting stuff online, then I think that you should be responsible for those mistakes. It's a cop-out. I've talked about this before. It's a cop-out from tech companies that they can just wash their hands of things like deciding what fair use is on YouTube. Like, I'd love to be able to sit and I just don't. I'd like to do more React stuff, because me trying to carry an hour like this is a lot of work, but also it's not that compelling. But I'd like to talk more about if I had a working computer. When I have a working computer, I'd love to be able to play music or show you reaction clips. But I know that the people that I talk about or make fun of or disagree with or whatever, abuse copyright strikes, right? Matt Walsh particularly uses those things, uses copyright strikes, as does Tim Pool. That these YouTube needs to take a stand there. They can't just go, well, you're on your own, take it to court, knowing full well that, court's expensive, right? And so, and tech do. And I think this is something that I think in the context of the Twitter files is what I've seen to be true as well, okay? And what I've heard in terms of tech policy, which is that Facebook tends to send armies of lawyers to certain policy things, right? So it's like 7 volunteers and 10 Facebook lawyers, right? And Google and Facebook will lobby for certain legislation, and they'll sort of, we saw that last year with Google and their, trying to get YouTubers to talk about the new Australian laws that were coming out, right? Which, again, I'm not sure is an appropriate use of their... Again, there should be regulation around how they're allowed to engage with their users and how they're allowed to use those databases for certain... There's a conflict of interest there, okay? But that's an issue of law, which is conflict of interest, or you've got, you've got to break them up, or you've got to have different processes. You can't just make absolute judgments about someone like Andrew Tate, for example. But that said, the censorship argument doesn't fly because, again, people will fuck up. Eventually they'll fuck up, and, it can only help, right? In the early days, remember all the criminals that would get caught just because they were like live tweeting their fucking crimes and live tweeting their Facebook accounts. Like that is useful. But also what it does is it puts sunlight on certain people. It takes away the mystery. My only concern with Andrew Tate with young boys is that being banned makes you more like this. This is teenage shit 101, okay? Which is that, first of all, they will pretend to like it more and say it more if it annoys the parents, or if people are concerned, they're more attracted to anything. They're screamer pillars, sexually attracted to fire. That's a teenager, right? They will do the opposite thing that their parents want them to do. That's why, I know I've got a Gen Z, right? Well, 2 Gen Zs. They're boys, right? My youngest, like, they know who Andrew Tate is, and they'll fucking wind me up with it, but they know better. They know different, right? Because they're, well, first of all, not idiots, but second of all, I've always been pushing sort of internet literacy on them, but they also do it because they know that their sisters are wokey. So, and so they do it partially to wind her up, partially to annoy her, partially to annoy the parents. But this is the effect that's going to happen, okay? Teenage shit 101, which is if you make it forbidden, if you forbid it, they want it more. So there's that. But at the same time, okay, you've got this tension of radicalization, which is that they can be nudged and pulled into scams and funnels with very powerful psychology, okay? But then you've also got the problem of if people are committing crimes out in plain sight and it goes viral, okay, how do you choose a jury if they have a jury, okay? If something gets massive exposure in the media, that fucks up their right to a trial because it's gone viral. So how can you know what I mean? So should you these are real problems. Like, should you prevent things from spreading in case there is a crime being committed, because that will compromise a case. Also, you're dealing with jurisdiction. Okay, anybody who's worked in the area of copyright, like or fed, or even sort of, because I used to run my web business and I had international clients, and international clients, had to operate on trust, because if they didn't pay me, suing them would have cost a fortune because the jurisdictional problem. You can't just, like within Australia, state to state, yes, you can. Like there's a, the Wall Street Journal lost a case. So with defamation, you can actually sue for defamation against an American. So in the Australian courts, you can actually initiate a defamation suit here against a United States company because of their global reach, and it be brought here. So that's but again, that's not everywhere. They don't have that law everywhere. There's all these gaps and all these problems. And so with someone like Andrew Tate, all right, who's a bit of a fucking douchebag, okay? I don't think but my sons know who he is. They think he's funny. But the main reason they think he's funny is because he annoys all the people that they are rebelling against. The teachers, they like Andrew Tate more because Andrew Tate annoys everybody. And that's a teenage boy thing, okay? And so I don't know what magical land that people live in where they think that if you take someone like Andrew Tate off the internet or you deplatform Donald Trump, first of all, it doesn't work. It makes the problem worse. But I don't think that it's actually about solving the problem. I think it's about what I was saying before, instant gratification versus actually solving the problem. So that instant gratification of censoring someone or getting them deplatformed, that's actually just mob justice shit, okay? That's just vigilante shit, okay? But taking them down, first of all, the evidence is wiped unless you subpoena the metadata or, which you can do, okay? I'm being simplistic, but you can actually subpoena. So even if you delete a tweet, it's there. It's still there, okay? There's still a record in the database. They still keep, again, in terms of compliance, they've got to keep records of all these things. But it's immense. There's a lot of it to sort through. So first of all, it would probably extend the court case. So let's just say you're a wokie and you've been defamed. Someone made fun of you and you got dogpiled, unfortunately, by a bunch of whoever, okay? You want that tweet up because that is the easiest way and the fastest way to get a lawsuit through and you get paid. Think about it cynically, okay? Which is that, first of all, the evidence is there, okay? The numbers are visible. The harm is visible because you can see the replies. It's out in public, okay? You don't need to go through a process of discovery. You don't need to go through subpoena. You don't need to prove, like say, if it was deleted, you don't need to prove. Because if you delete it, it deletes the replies and all those things as well, right? So people can't see the crime. You can't see it. But if it's up and it's doing you active harm, okay, you can actually sue. That can actually be the difference between you being able to sue and you not being able to sue. Now, I'm not a defamation lawyer. I know a lot of stuff around the social sciences. So it's just, legal studies is my minor. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm saying this is roughly how it works. Like, as I see it, censorship is the antithesis of due process, not just because of rights. I think that's the wrong way to come about it. But first of all, like I said, it's public, it's evidence, it's open evidence, it's there, it's viewable. The judge can turn their phone on and see it. It's there, it's live. Versus, I went through this with my harassment when I had the stalker back in 2011, and I went to I had to, because they were in my state, in my city, and I had to go to the police, and they said, and they were harassing me and then deleted those tweets, but I got screenshots. And I took printouts to the police and they said, that's not enough. We need and it was, obviously the law's changed since then. Obviously it's a bit different, but it's hard to prove because the police aren't going to dedicate resources. They're not going to, someone harassed me on Twitter, unless it's really bad, they're not going to involve the feds because they need to, because again, it's a resource, it's a complicated thing. It's like resources, whether it's worth pursuing the case, there's lots of reasons why. It's not just a simple matter of it being illegal. If you think that the police just show up every time there's a minor crime, then you're immensely fucking privileged because you've never been police don't show up. They don't show up to most things if they can't be, they just give you your report number. They take the report for insurance and that's it. But the thing that needs reforming is defamation law, or having some sort of regulatory as part of, say, the tech ombudsman, for example, information ombudsman, probably wouldn't be the IO. But anyway, there's some sort of ombudsman where you can go and have someone rule that you've been defamed and you get damages. Like when you're a victim of crime, much like victim of crime compensation here, which is that if you are a victim of a crime and that then results in a conviction, then you receive some sort of payout from the government to sort of compensate you for that, because they sort of, that's something that there is a criminal conviction and you can, anyway, that's again simplistic. But there's not a simple process either. But there's got to be this is a gap in process that I'm seeing here, which is that the telecommunications ombudsman works really well, because the consumers can complain to the telecommunications ombudsman, and just simply getting a complaint costs that company a $25,000 fine. Okay, so just merely getting a complaint, so that you are obligated to contact their complaints department first and have it resolved. But if you don't get anywhere, you can go to the ombudsman, right? At which point, if they haven't satisfactory, if they get a fine just for that, just for not solving your complaint. This is stuff people need to know about how to, you threaten them with the ombudsman because it costs them a fortune, right? Always do a complaint, always. But the same thing maybe exists for defamation, which is that, yes, while the courts, leaving it to the civil court system is probably, it worked before. I think what we need here is, because of the speed of it, the frequency of it, you need some sort of legal consequences for harassment, defamation that moves faster. Also acts as a deterrent for people to do these sorts of things, which is that, every time you do this, you are playing with fire, okay? There are likely to be consequences. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not pro-censorship. I'm pro-self-control. I'm pro-responsible citizenship. And I like to trust people to do the right thing. I prefer that, but there do need to be things that exist for people who just won't do the right thing, and will just keep doubling down, and will, because those people exist. They're a smaller percentage of people than I think most people say, but those things are necessary. And I think that anybody who is talking about any of this like it's simple, because also remember, like I just said, which is that the second that you leave things out in the open, you've got other problems that kick in. Okay, like I said, the vulnerability of 11-year-olds, there's that portion. Most, again, 95% will be fine with it, take it as the joke that it is, whatever. But someone like Andrew Tate, especially post-pandemic and, all of that sort of stuff, where kids are particularly vulnerable to radicalisation because of, various factors that make them more susceptible to this sort of thing, that, that 5 to 7, maybe I'd say 10%, of in Tate's case, of kids that are going to go off and sort of fall into sort of more of the more extreme parts of the internet, okay, which exists, okay. And if I'm done arguing with people who naively assume that everyone has agency or has the capacity to make these decisions or has all of the information. This idea of rational choice and agency works well if there aren't so many forces at play designed to get you to completely ignore all of that, okay, and to manipulate you out of using your rational brain, okay. That's where the law, this is where I'm talking in the area of lizard brain hacking, manipulating your data so that in a way that they know your behavior better than you do. So, and you're being nudged in a certain direction. That is something that needs to be legislated and regulated, the use of it, and also the way that it's used. So you want to legislate in a way with exemptions so that things like researchers and people who again, psychologists, registered psychologists or registered people or people who have gone through the necessary training, okay, are allowed to sort of access data, because there is an assumption and a presumption that they will act ethically, and if they don't, then they come before a board, okay? And this is the problem. It's one of regulation and it's one of professional standards. Same thing happened with yellow journalism. Like I said, all these people, all this gutter press, gossip rags, all the fake news everywhere. Eventually, they had to put standards in place for journalism. Where did those go? The same thing happened with radio, and the same thing's going to have to happen with the internet. The problem with the internet is that it is global, and we don't necessarily have the legislative vehicles for global problems like this, because people can just switch to a VPN, okay? They can just switch their location. They can get around it. So this is where, and then those that resist the world, globalists, it's all just globalists. It's like, well, no, yes, I agree. However, these things are in constant tension. And that's where, I mean, I know I waffle a bit, and I know I've probably streamed too long. Well, I have. It's an hour and a half. I'm just trying to tease, but part of the reason why I talk is because, I just talk fluidly, is because I want you to be having these thoughts and thinking things, next steps, thinking through steps, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's funny, Andrew Tate. Okay, yeah, cool. Shouldn't be banned. Cool. Brain broken. Easy. That's the easy take. Making generalizations about the media, which I love doing, because I think 99% of them are fucking corrupt garbage people. Okay, I agree. But you got to go to the next level. How do you solve it? What's the solution? What are the potential solutions? But what are the actual problems at a granular level? Okay, what part of this problem are you looking at? Because if you're looking at, tweets being live that are harmful, okay, so let's just accept, come with me and accept that some tweets can be harmful first. Some will go, no, you can't. That's an idiotic, moronic view. Of course they can, okay. Defamation law, incitement law, all those things exist. Those are defined. Words can cause harm, okay? Now, can there be scope creep? Yes. But the problem is in the abuse of power and the corruption and the conflict of interest. It doesn't mean you throw out the definition of, harmful. Like those things are, yeah. That's why I hate fuzzy terms like hate, because that's obviously a subjective term. But there are words that are there are things that are legally defined, right? And these processes are in place, which is that people want to change the law. They have a fucking policy meeting. They meet their member of parliament, who they elect. You participate in the process. You join a political party. You don't just censor everybody you don't like and hope that you don't get caught, okay? Or you don't just go off and start defaming everybody without expecting to be sued for defamation or having to pay up for that at some point. Censorship is not the answer. And I mean, Twitter proves that in both ways, which is that, what we're seeing with the Twitter files, with this suppression of reasonable voices. Now, some of them, like my last stream, I was like, pandemic is one of those cases where it's exceptional. Because I said before, as a comms person or UX comms, they all overlap. As someone who works, with campaigning, when the timing of something is important as well as the actual message, okay? And I think that was part of the problem is, yes, while it was a big narrative, we're talking, the word that I hated was the merely disagreeing with the CDC. And it's like, well, no, it's not, there's no merely there. When you disagree with the institution that everyone agrees to and mandates to make decisions in these circumstances, if you're going to go against them, it's not necessarily authoritarian. It's just that that, again, a combination of factors, the timing of it, why you're doing it. I mean, there was a lot of breakthrough people who made a lot of money just saying bullshit about this stuff, and still do, right? They went full like anti-vax and lost their minds. But there was a clear financial incentive in doing that. There were people who, like in my case, I had concerns. Like I talked about some of this stuff, but I learned very early on that the timing wasn't right, that it was just not the right time to talk about these things. I was going to get people where every time I tried to say anything, because I couldn't breathe with the masks, okay? So I just didn't go out of the house. But, I wouldn't dare have moaned about the mask, because I got, first of all, friends who work in emergency departments and they were in them for 16 hours a day. So first of all, it's a cunt to turn around and just complain about having to wear a mask at the shop. It's just about reading the room. It's not necessarily about, these things are fluid. So when we're talking about something like Andrew Tate and censorship, there's lots of depends. So in the instance of something like sex trafficking, crime, the fact that he might be using that to grow, again, I'm not getting into that stuff because I don't know. Again, that's what the courts decide, right? I don't do trial by fucking Twitter, funnily enough. And I just assume that innocent till proven guilty. That's a principle, okay? Especially from like people like this Greta Thunberg thing, where it's funny how, isn't it interesting? Because people will slip up. If you're paying attention, the people that were sharing the bullshit about Greta Thunberg and the pizza box are the same network of people who spread the same shit about kiwi farms. They are the same people. They are basically testing what bullshit they can spread. They're bad actors, okay? It's the same people over and over again who are learning that they can write and determine what the truth is. That said, there's also a responsibility on each of us to understand that it's like, well, in a relationship, there's things that you hold back and you don't say because there's other things at play. It's not appropriate in a public setting. It's a conversation for now. You might be feeling like, you're not going to say the right words. You haven't found the right words yet. If you're waiting to see, you're trying to wait for the right time, okay? These things apply like societally as well. And something like COVID and the pandemic, this is what I didn't articulate. I shouldn't do evening streams. I shouldn't do morning streams either, but, evening streams particularly. But what I was trying to articulate was that, which was that at the end of the day, sometimes it's not even the message. It's the impact of the timing of the message, which was that, there's a fucking pandemic on and you're the outlier. And there was a massive misinformation campaign. There were all these troll farms trying to nudge people away and actually actively trying to dissuade people who needed vaccines from vaccines, okay? And that's continuing. And that's a real, and, the problem of audience capture and all those sorts of issues. And so to turn around and just sort of, again, complain that you sort of were suppressed, again, there's multiple ways to look at that, which was maybe it wasn't necessarily the suppression. It was just, it wasn't what you were saying. It was the timing of it and measured with lots of different factors. And it seemed like Twitter were actually, sorry, again, this corner makes my nose itch. I don't know why. It's something I'm allergic to. I've got to... Yeah, it's only this corner of my office that makes my nose itch. Sorry. And I can't see the preview, so I don't know how much I'm glowing. But yes, forgive me. I'm going in a second anyway. But I think that this is where you've got to actually, I think this is how you get out of this, cortisol dopamine ball, right? Oh, Matt, how was your flight? Goodness me. Hello. Matt's just flown from Sydney to Seattle, so he's probably buggered. Or he's on a stopover. Anyway, so what I was saying is I think that we're Happy New Year to you too. I'm probably going to stream a New Year related one tomorrow, but we'll see how we go. Oh, actually, no, I won't do tomorrow. Probably the day after. I was going to do a retrospective and react to my clips, but literally my computer, it's just end of life. I just can't do it. Can't do it. Yeah, so I need a new computer and I'm trying to figure it out. So I'm limping to that. But I wanted to do a retrospective with some clips and react to old shit from the year and talk about some stuff. But I won't be able to show any real screen shares or anything like that until I get a new computer. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so become a patron. Matt's already a patron, but do become a patron. Anyway, I need to get the laptop that I need to stream with the power that I need to stream and do all the things like the Snapchat thing that I did at the beginning. You'll appreciate that one. It's a $5,000 MacBook Pro. Like, fucking hell. Yeah, but I am going to be doing my credits, so I'm going to make sure that my producers get a credit, and I'm just refactoring everything and redoing. I'm setting up my website. I don't want to surrender to the Substack beast because I don't understand the Substack appeal. You're just going on another third-party another SaaS platform that can like ban you. Like what they've said, oh, we're not going to ban you, but that's what Twitter said. That's what they said. And there's not even an API. At least with Twitter and Facebook or whatever, I can pull a backup every time I tweet, which is pretty much what I do. But you can't or get a data dump. You can't, and you can export with Substack, but it's an RSS file. It's like a WordPress. It's like, well, if you're going to export to, if WordPress is your emergency hatch, then just go on WordPress, and I can make my own anyway, and I can customize it and make it look pretty anyway. But I'll probably end up duplicating to Substack. But I did have a poll, but everyone was being a smartass, so there's no point. But I don't think anyone's going to pay on Substack for my shit. So, but I think I'll just keep it on my website. Yeah, does he? Oh, okay, good. If he does, then if Elon buys Substack, then that would be a good move. But unless it's got an API or webhook where you can post everything automatically, it's like, and pull it when it, or in the opposite direction. Every time you post on Substack, you post it to WordPress. That it's not flying with me. Like at least with Patreon, if I integrate with Patreon, I can sync those posts. You can't do that with Substack. So I don't get the appeal. Again, it just goes to show that it's got nothing to do with whether you've got a better product and everything to do with whether you're funded. And then the thing that gets you funded is the thing that is, is VC money. And the people just don't know history. This is what Facebook said. This is what Twitter said. This is what MySpace said. They all said it. And eventually the real world collided. And I'm surprised, Substack have held the line so far. But with time, trust me, the forces, because everyone, especially on Substack, seem to think these things are single problems. And they're not single problems. They're not about speech, okay? It's about how much speech you can bear. And the people who want to censor a lot of speech are sort of biting off their own face, chopping off their own nose to spite their face, so to speak. Mine's itchy. Because, that being visible and public, it just makes it easier to prosecute and easier to prove and measure the harm. The numbers are there. Everyone can see it. You've got more witnesses. It's more of an open shut case in the case of crime and defamation law and those sorts of things. And then if you can reform the defamation's legal, I think, again, tech companies have to have in-house teams for these things. I don't think they can get around it. I don't think there's a way to get around it where they have to mediate. They have to go through a mediation process between users. That's going to be and so they're just going to have to, or they're going to have to create, not obviously under those big companies, that's too much power, but much like the oversight board, okay, that needs to be expanded into social responsibility. They actually have to start creating these transparent, visible organisations, because government, as much as I'd like government to do it, I don't know whether nation states are best equipped to do it because they don't have the global infrastructure, and people aren't going to accept any kind of sort of international mandate on this, especially the United States. The United States don't even sign up to the Charter of Human Rights. They're not going to fucking sign up to this stuff. Right? The United States is rogue state. Okay, that's just unfortunately the world we live in, where the rogue state, the problem child, the worst offender is the person with the biggest army, the biggest military, the loudest voice. And again, Americans love America, love American government, American interests. They sort of slipped into this fascistic kind of setup, and it's very deeply worrying. But I hope that it self-corrects. It's either going to correct or collapse. You can't really keep going this way. You can only hold that tension for so long before sort of, revolution or, some other major self-correction happens. So also just to chime in on the title of the stream, Andrew Tate got owned by Greta and then arrested, and that is good. Yeah, but he got owned by Greta, but the pizza box wasn't the culprit. So it was actually that they were closing in on him anyway, and he was just posting on social media. That was just That was a lucky coincidence. It just gave, I imagine it gave the coordinates. But like I said, if you watch this back, police don't make arrests unless they've been building a case. And the Romanian police have actually commented and said that it was actually, it was an operation for over a period of time. They've known he's in Romania for ages. So, so it was just, But it was funny and, but it was really interesting to see how people just go with the truth. It's like, that's not what happened. And they just run with it like it's truth. It's very interesting, isn't it? Even I did. I got caught in that one because it was hilarious. But remember that might be a one-off. But when we talk about, like, let's say how, I've talked about how Coney 2012 was the lesson, and then everyone sort of learned from Coney 2012 how to manipulate emotions. Every time something breaks through like that, okay, this is where it warrants pause, because even though I might have got caught up and gone, oh, yeah, and gone along with it, it's funny, that means that someone's testing how many people they can fool for the next one, okay? And I think that's what you've got to understand, that they're always sort of measuring these things. Bad actors are always measuring, the A/B testing, they're always nudging you, they're always seeing what works, they're always trying to find loopholes. Andrew Tate, Trump, those are the epitome, or the perfect storm of all of those loopholes sort of culminating in one person. These are predictable, okay? Much like someone like Perez Hilton was, a product of his time with the internet and, various things. All these sort of actors, they're all interesting figures to study. But, making them the pariahs for a system that's failing is not really necessarily the best way to go, because it's a system problem. It's the same thing but again, censorship also doesn't work. Doesn't achieve what you want unless instant gratification is the thing that you're looking for, or shortcut solutions. Or, again, there is immediate harm. Like, obviously, I don't think there's many people that would be pro live streaming of like murders or rapes or snuff or anything like that. I mean, I think that's fairly, but this is where it becomes tricky, and it's where, but again, if you are, but there also, I think it also means that if you are, much like if you're incorrectly charged with a crime, you've got some recourse. Okay, if you're incorrectly imprisoned, or you're defamed, and I think that there should be some recourse if you've been. Like, for me, I actually think that this might be an interesting test case, but I can barely afford a new computer, let alone a fucking lawsuit against Twitter. But this idea that, I've been unfairly accused of crimes that I didn't commit, okay, through a campaign of troll farms and various other things. I have been limited in my public life. I've been put in I've been sanctioned. I haven't been afforded due process. I haven't been afforded right of appeal. I have had no ability to correct it, despite me having rights under the Privacy Act in Australia. Okay, I have the right to, amend my record. Twitter have just ghosted me, and this is where the same. If you are incorrectly deplatformed, let's just say, I think that maybe people would sign up for something like, if they are a harm to themselves or others, or are inciting, we err on the side of caution, with an understanding that there is a penalty if they're wrong. Okay, and I think that that's maybe the way to look at it, which is that every time Twitter incorrectly bans someone, there's a fine attached to it. Okay, there's a penalty. At the moment, there's no penalty. Right now, I've just got to wait for the good graces of Elon Musk and hope that Twitter fixed my account. That's not a process. Without suing them, okay, that's the gap. The gap is in the fact that there is no actual penalty or disincentive for mistakes. And that's why I think that I personally, I don't know about anyone else, but I'd sign up for something like that, where I understand that if I fuck up, but for the better of everybody else, for everyone else's, health, safety, for the, all those things, if there is an imminent safety risk, you can take it down, but you need to have a just. That's what just cause is, right? But you have to have just cause. You have to be able to back it up, and if you're wrong, there needs to be a process in which you can correct it, or pay compensation, or pay, like all of these sorts of things, because I think the problem is that there's no real consequences for it. I think you'd be surprised how quickly, if Facebook were getting a $50,000 fine every time they were, incorrectly suspending someone who can, if someone has verified their identity, okay, they have been taken down pending investigation, okay. That investigation shows that there's no reason a judge can't say also Facebook fine in that instance. That's something that could be legislated, right? But I think that's a policy solution that might work. But this is where censorship bad. Who cares? Yeah, redundant. Thanks. We agree. But we also need a solution, and we need to start talking about solutions and the next level. And like I've said, I think a growing theme in most of my streams is that for everything that you fix, you create 3 more problems. So you've got to think about, like I said, with the whole compromising of a jury. In a jury, you can't have something go viral. Like how on earth would you, like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, like that was very difficult to have a jury, or the Alex Jones, like those things. When there's a jury, it becomes very difficult, and that then brushes up against other rights. Rights are often in conflict with each other, and this is the role of government. And anyone who's going, fucking government, those people are people who are idiots. Okay? Because they think that this is why judges exist. This is why process exists. This is a process that most people have agreed on as the less perfect. It's closest to perfect that we can get. But the other solutions of, let's just get our guns and solve it. Let's just use the threat of violence to solve our problems. Or let's just naively assume that everyone has equal playing field in a transaction. Or anybody who's been a vendor for a large corporation and sent an invoice and waited 120 days to get paid knows that there's no fucking equal and had their contract replaced with the contract just to get the job. You know that there's no such thing as a free and like open contract when there's a massive imbalance of power, especially economic power. Okay, especially when it depends on whether you eat and pay your rent or not. Okay. You could walk away from a deal like that if you weren't having to pay bills. Okay, that's just people who this libertarian fucking argument is so stupid. At least any kind of anarchist thing is just insane because it just doesn't work in a complex society, right? Again, these things should be orientations. They should be the goal. Like liberty is obviously the goal, but what do you mean by liberty? Okay, as little regulation as needed, good. As little bureaucracy, yes. But to be in like this land where there's no government, no bureaucracy, you assume that everyone it's actually just stupid. You're an idiot for thinking those sorts of things, right? And it's like, but yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think the system is always rigged. I think the system's just always complicated, and it depends. I think it's just. And the barrier to entry to fixing systems, it takes lots and lots of it. That's why it takes political will, and it takes a business case, and it takes some sort of trigger, because inertia is just the part of being human. Because we will. That's just our back to heuristics that I mentioned at the beginning, which is inertia is our natural state, and especially when you're trying to organise like lots and lots of people into a group to solve complex problems, people are going to each lean on inertia. There needs to be a strong political will or strong mandate or strong will to change things to actually affect that change. Like anybody who has just worked in tech and done a digital transformation project knows that 80% of them fail just because off the bat, most fail. Most attempts to build anything from the ground, and that's tech. That's with a project that is relatively new with 10-year-old tech, not with 100-year-old systems with ingrained prejudices, history, like long history. That's just tech projects, okay? Again, that comes back to what I'm saying about trying to get people to change their heart, change their minds on big shit and make massive change is actually tremendously difficult. Right, political willy, yeah. That's Donald Trump because he's a dick. Anyway, you've got me at the end, Matt. Go get some sleep. I had some medicine brownies. Well, not brownies. I had half of a medicine brownie, despite being told to have half. And I would, no, but it worked with my pain. So I've got to, yeah. So, someone I know just made me a brownie and was like, "Yep, have some, and try it." And because it's not something I do. So I thought, well, before I go through all this health medical drama, I'll just try one of your brownies, and it worked quite well. So I feel quite rested in the morning, actually. Better than Lyrica. My God, that stuff fucking turns you into a zombie. So, but anyway, I'm going to go. Thanks for watching. I'm sorry this was a little bit haphazard. It is New Year's Eve. I'm clearly in holiday mode and clearly don't know what day it is and that sort of stuff. I'm working behind the scenes to just get all this stuff. I'm just trying the computer problem. It's just, ugh. But trying to relent to Substack. Try not to relent to Substack, because obviously the reason why people use those things is because you can just get up quickly and write your stuff and focus on content. But, I really don't want to go down that path. I want to get my website and everything finished. But then because I'm a user experience person and a designer, I then fixate over the design and the experience, and then I end up spending all day doing one template page like I did for my, But once it's done, it's there and done. But I also like to do it the right way. I like to make sure that it's, it's all thought of. So I architect everything properly so I don't have to go back and re-enter data and, migrating databases anyway, boring stuff. Custom post types on WordPress and all that shit is very annoying in relationships, because it's very annoying to migrate and whatever with WordPress. It's just a pain in the ass. But I'm on it. I've just got to architect some of the information to make it more flexible, because I've got these two worlds, which is my previous bloggy world and my professional world, where, if people want to work with me, my professional me, and then they've got my, my opinion me, political me. Now, those things are related to each other, but I've never quite been able to find a way to synthesize those two brands outside of this this little content experiment thing that I'm doing that nobody watches. And everyone complains about the sound and things being out of sync. It's like, become a patron before you complain about the sound. So anyway, I'm going to go. Happy New Year. I'll be in touch. I'll be probably day after. My voice is fucked. Like, I'm having to speak deliberately low as well, because the top register of my voice is gone. See? Listen, I have no top register. Crazy. Anyway, so I love you. Become a patron, or figure out how I can get a new computer. I don't know. All my computers everyone's got a better computer than me. But because we can afford tech and stuff, but we're currently paying, because with the business we used to lease computers, but because I kind of just sort of drifted off with the business, it's now just a direct expense. It's not something that I'm covering with cash flow. I used to be able to neutralize it, right, with all those things. But with leasing Paul's computer, and everyone's got a better computer than me in their house. So, but that's okay. Anyway, I love you. Thanks for watching. I'll be back. I don't know what to say. Never been good at the sign up. I'm tired. I'm going to go and have another coffee and some food and relax. And I'm lying. I'm going to be doing some work because I never stop working. Anyway, take care. Matt, get some rest. I love you all. Thank you, producer Matt, as always. Okay. Thank you for watching. I imagine people have dropped off, but True Dreamer TV and Diane and Arpoon Wafy. Sorry about the sound. There's nothing I can do about it. Unless I suddenly find Unless Ilma buy me a computer, there's not much I can do. Maybe I should sue Twitter and make my settlement a new computer. Anyway, I love you. I'm not going to sing in the end today either because I've got to rest my voice. Okay. Ciao. Oops. I had to change it to 720p, so now I've got to change that to fit to screen. Here we go. Whoops, nope. Let's do some entertaining things. I'll talk. I won't sing, but we'll go do-do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do for 720p. 720p. Go to the beginning of the video and you'll see me as Andrew Tate. Go watch the beginning, Matt. I think you'll laugh. I'm going to make it as a clip, I think. I'm going to put it on fucking TikTok or some shit. Okay.